Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Avi Havivi's weekly Siddur class.
We're now doing the Psalm for Wednesday. We did the first half last time. We're going to do the second half this time. We'll review first, of course. So in the Sim Shalom, complete Sim Shalom, this is page 26, the bottom part. The Slim, page 87, the bottom part. I do understand they are working on a weekday Lev Shalem, so eventually there'll be another page to announce, but you may have it in your Siddur or whatever you have at home. Psalm for Wednesday. So we're going to review the first half, which I'll do that quickly. God of vengeance, appear. Rise up, O judge of the earth, and give recompense to the arrogant. How long will the wicked, O God? How long will the wicked rejoice? Let's see. Swaggering, boasting, or pouring out arrogance, swaggering, boasting. We have slightly different English translations in our two different versions of the Sim and the Slim. They oppress the people. They torment your own. Okay, nice translation of nachalatcha, which means literally your portion. And who are the people? We said this is now explicated more fully in the next line. What is what constitutes, in what do we see their oppression of God's people? They murder the widow and the stranger and murder the orphans. You know, very often we talk about defrauding or taking advantage of the poor, the orphan, and the widow. This is much, much harsher, right? They kill them. Saying, oh, God doesn't see any of this. God does not pay it any heed. Presumably it's the wicked who are saying that. Although it may actually be the downtrodden who are saying that, right? Someone is saying God doesn't pay any attention to what's going on earth, obviously. Then the psalmist says, hey, listen up, you fools. When are you going to figure it out? You think the one, capital O, who, grants hearing doesn't hear? The one who creates vision doesn't see? The one who disciplines nations will not chastise? The one who teaches humans wisdom? All rhetorical, right? The answer to those being, of course, God will. Of course, God sees and hears. Okay? Hashem yodea machshavot adam ki hi mahavel. God understands, knows all human thoughts, for they are pointless. Oops, I've let someone in. Hold on. Okay. Right? So human beings, what are the human thoughts? So it could either be the bad guys who are doing this stuff to the good guys. Everything they're thinking, not to the good guys, but to the downtrodden, the helpless, the weak. It could be that everything that those wicked think is foolish or pointless. Or it could be you fools among the nation who think that this is going to go on because God doesn't see or hear. Those thoughts are pointless or foolish. That thought of yours is foolish. One way or the other, we're doing a contrast between mortals and God, right? What humans conceive of is foolish, pointless, futile. I think we stopped there. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay, so I think the layout of the thought up until now, sequence of things, is fairly clear, but are there any questions about anything we've read so far, either language-wise or conceptually? I just want everyone to make sure we're all on the same train here. Okay, so there's bad stuff going on. Some people, either the wicked or the downtrodden or the foolish bystanders think, well, God doesn't do anything. God's not going to do anything, right? And then the psalmist says, fools, you think nothing's going to happen? You think this is the final act of the play? So now we go on. Ashrei hagever asher tiyasrenu yah umitoratcha talamdenu. Okay? Happy is the person whom God disciplines and teaches Torah. So who is that person? Who could it be? Well, it could be the foolish bystanders who don't understand God. They need to learn Torah. It could be the wicked, okay, who are going to get punished. It could be, I do want to point out, the suffering people themselves. Ashrei hagever asher tiyasrenu yah literally means happy is the person whom God disciplines. And liyaser in biblical Hebrew, it doesn't mean discipline like when I talk to families as a psychiatrist. It means, you have to put your kid on a point chart so that they hang up their wet towel and they have better discipline. That's not what discipline means in biblical discipline. It usually implies physical chastisement. Okay? So, and perhaps this alludes to an idea that the rabbis, perhaps it suggests an idea that the rabbis sort of argue about in the Talmud about, is suffering in this life a good thing or not? Because the sages believe in a life after this life. Some of them sometimes say, oh, suffering in this life is good because you are, paying down your debt. You're being given some of the punishment you deserve, which means in the next life, you're not going to be given that punishment. You're going to get reward. There's an interesting debate about this. One rabbi goes to visit another rabbi who is sick and suffering, and they debate about this. So just sort of hold that there. So it's good to be disciplined and to learn. Lashkit lo mimei ra ad yikarei larasha shachat. Right? Here's to calm them during bad days until a pit is dug for the wicked. A pit being dug for the wicked, presumably meaning they are going to get their punishment. So what should people do until the wicked get their punishment? Wait calmly during their time of suffering. Training him to wait calmly in adversity. Okay? So who's getting the adversity? I just want to point out who's getting the adversity, right? It's the downtrodden. So this could be, a forerunner of blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount in the Gospels. Okay? Which, to whatever extent the Sermon on the Mount took place, it was a lecture that a Jewish teacher was giving to other Jews, I'd like to point out. Right? There's nothing Christian about the early Jesus movement. So, Ashrei, this really is a version as blessed are the meek. Mm-hmm. Yeah? The humble, the downtrodden. Ashrei hagever. They're fortunate. Okay? Just stay calm. Don't worry. A pit will be dug for the wicked. Not a message of fight back, I want to point out. Why? We have these two words for God's portion, Am and Nachala, that we saw a few lines ago, right? They oppress God's nation and God's portion. But here it says, God is not going to abandon God's nation or abandon God's portion. You think you're abandoned? You're not. Ki ad tzedek yashuv mishpat ve'acharav kol yishrei lev. A challenging sentence grammatically. It's clear that something is going to happen, which is tzedek and mishpat, righteousness and justice, and something for the those who are straight of heart. We might call it in English, pure of heart. Okay? Justice will return to the righteous. All the upright in heart will strive for it. Same English translation in both. Does anyone have a different Siddur with a different English translation? Michael? Just that line. Michael O.
Let's see. Wait a minute. The line of
justice, righteous.
Justice shall revert to righteousness, and following it will be all of upright heart. So
right.
It's not that different.
Well, which I don't really understand either. Okay, so something about something. It's a difficult sentence in Hebrew, which means something like there's going to be justice, there's going to be righteousness. And either ve'acharav, either after it or they should follow it, those who are straight of heart. Presumably that means you shouldn't be wicked. You also shouldn't be one of the foolish people who say God doesn't see, God doesn't hear. Right? If I just said to you like, oh, which club do you want to be in? Mm-hmm. Right? At this point in the Psalm, it's like, oh Lord, I want to be in that number. Right? Yeah. What number do you want to be part of? What group do you want to be part of? The ones who are waiting for and expecting and know that there will be justice and righteousness. Something like that. The Yishrei Lev, right? I want to be among those who are of straight heart. Notice, by the way, similar to what we spoke about on the Sunday Psalm, Psalm 24, who gets to go up to the temple? Neki chapayim uvar levav, the one who has clean hands and a pure heart. And here, bar levav means pure heart. Here we have yishrei lev, the straight-hearted, the straight-minded. Okay, so in this section, I think we just read a new section. The psalmist is saying something like either stay calm, the wicked are going to get their comeuppance, and justice and righteousness will appear, right? Because God does not abandon God's people, and justice and righteousness will take over the day, and you want to be one of the Yishrei Lev, not one of the wicked, okay? Or you want to be one of the Yishrei Lev and not one of the foolish who say, God's not going to do anything. But it's not quite even just stay calm. It's tolerate your suffering, okay? Lahashkit lo, from sheket, to remain, literally, what does that mean? To remain what? Sheket.
Quiet.
Remain, quiet. Your suffering quietly is what it might mean. It's very strong and may offend us. So that's why I'm or may not correlate with our sensibilities, our sociocultural sensibilities at this moment in time. That's why I'm highlighting it. Okay. Not everything it says in every prayer is something that you say like, oh, I agree with that 100%. I could have written that if I was more poetic, right? And knew Hebrew. So it's saying, take the suffering calmly. Ashrei hagever asher tiasrenu ya. Happy is the person who takes God's chastisement. It's only temporary, that chastisement. Don't worry, straight-hearted people. God does not abandon God's own forever. The wicked will get their comeuppance, even though at this moment in time, that is the implication of this, at this moment in time, that does not appear apparent. It's not what's happening now. Just trust, have faith. Okay, Michael O is chomping at the bit.
Yeah, well, I'm just, isn't this assuming that the evildoers are going to change their ways or have tshuva what? It's a big assumption for people, for the psalmist to say, just be patient. I mean, I know I'm thinking of it in terms of perhaps a more modern interpretation.
Yeah, right. Well, I just want to point out, there's nothing in here so far about the evildoers changing. Actually, what it says is what will rectify this situation is that a pit will be dug for the evildoers, which sort of means, it's kind of biblical proto idea for, by the way, the pit sometimes means a trap. Okay. But sometimes it's a concrete thing. There's all sorts of things in Psalms about falling in a trap. You have to imagine, pre-modern traps of there's like a hole dug in the ground and it's covered with something and then someone falls in it, like in the forest. Okay. Sometimes they have traps, which are like bird traps and animal traps. They, those snappy things that animals get caught in. So, or sometimes shachat is used as one of the synonyms for going down to the underworld, death, what comes to be thought of later as hell, but is probably not in the Bible, because the Bible probably doesn't have hell, but it does have an underworld. So, Michael, I just want to argue with you a little bit and say, well, okay, that you may want to put that interpretation in, but it seems to me here so far, what's going to happen to the wicked is they will have their downfall. Not they will repent and say, oh, widows and orphans, we're sorry. We're going to,
I see that. Right.
We're going to build more homeless housing. Right. Okay. Doesn't say that. It says they're going to get theirs, I think. So what are you, meaning we bystanders, supposed to do at this moment, at this Psalm? I think it's wait. Just wait for it. They'll get theirs. Okay.
Can that simply be metaphoric for a grave?
Okay. Yeah. Which means what? Dead.
Dead.
Yeah. Don't worry. God will kill them. That's what that means. If you want to say one way or the other, they're going down. Okay. We'll come back to that. Okay. Perhaps. Okay. Another section. Not sure. Mi yakum li im mireim. Mi yatsev li im poale aven. Okay. I think this sentence is I think probably the pshat means who will stand up for me against the evildoers? Who will stand up for me against the evildoers? We just have it, parallelism. Yityasev and Yakum, Mireim and Poaleaven. Mireim is, bad doers. Poaleaven is those who do evil. All right. So rhetorical question. Who's going to stand up for me? Right. Presumably God. Lulei Adonai Ezratali Kimat Shachna Duma Nafshi. Had God not been my help, my life almost would have gone down to Duma, another word for grave or underworld. I might have been dead if God wouldn't have stood up for me. Barely alive, barely saved me. Ima marti mata ragli chastecha Adonai yisadeni. If I said my foot is stumbling, I'm slipping, Hashem, your faithfulness supports me. Birov sarapai bikirvi tanchumecha yeshashu nafshi. When I have, one translation here is cares. It's a bit of a stronger word. It's when I have tormenting thoughts is really what it means. Okay? Bad thoughts, worried thoughts.
They use forebodings in the arts world.
Forebodings, nice, by the way, for those who look at Hebrew. Barbara, please look at the word sar apai. It is a very odd word. It is a quadriliteral. It's a 4-letter root, not a 3-letter root. Sar af. It's a very strange word. I do not know its derivation or etymology. You can ask Vered. Why is it a 4-letter root? Where do 4-letter roots come from? Whatever. My cares, my troubles, my forebodings. So when I have forebodings inside of me, God, I'm talking to God, your comforts gladden me. Okay? So I almost could have died had God not, who's going to defend me? I almost could have died. But when I have all this, when I feel my foot stumbling, God, you support me. When I'm filled with forebodings, worries, cares, your comfort gladdens me. That's one possibility. Another possibility, which I will admit may be my reading in something I want to read in. I used to say, no, it could mean this. And This year I'll say, I don't know, maybe I made it up. Miyakum imreim, go back 2 or 3 lines. Who will stand up for me with the evildoers? I think it could be interpreted to mean, who will stand up with me against the evildoers? Who will stand up with me against the evildoers? Mi yityasev li yakum li. It could mean stand up on my behalf. And you can argue with me. You could say, if the psalmist wanted to say with me, he would have said et. And I'll accept that argument maybe. And I personally prefer that interpretation because it makes us God's partners. Because up until now, the psalmist is counseling what we would call passivity. Just take it. You know what? Your suffering is a learning experience. It pays off some of your debt because we all deserve some punishment from God because we all sin. And so it'll make the next life easier. Don't worry. The sinners will get theirs. Just be calm, right? Keep calm and carry on. Keep calm and take it, perhaps, is the tone of the psalm. Okay? So, mi akum li imreim, who's going to stand up and help me against those evildoers, makes it somewhat more active. And I used to think, that's what the line means. And now I say, that might be what the line means. Okay? So,
well, I just
one more thing, Michael. One way or the other, whether I'm active or not, depending on how you interpret that line, it still means, were it not for God's support, I got 1 foot in the grave. Were it not for God's support, I would be done for. Whether it is God's actual support or the support in God's mind, in my mind, right? Berov sarapai bikirbi. When I am full of troubles, forebodings, right? The comfort is internal. Is it internal comfort or is it actually support? Okay, I want to say, Ima marti mata ragli. If I said, my foot is slipping, chastecha Hashem yis adeni, your loyalty, Hashem, supports me, helps me, right? Sa'ad, which becomes the root of the modern Hebrew word, also rabbinic Hebrew, se'udah, meaning a feast. The core word actually means to support or help. Okay? So it's not just a thought somehow, right? Somehow God is helping me. Is God helping me while I am being passive and hoping not to die? Is this internal help? Is God externally helping me while I'm being passive and hoping not to die? Or is God actually helping alongside of me, who am trying to do battle with the evildoers? Again, perhaps my wishful thinking about what that sentence means. But that's what I'd like it to mean. Michael O.
Well, I think I like that interpretation because it's much, as opposed to just being passive and not doing anything. What you're suggesting is that Barov Sar Api Bakir B they translated here, when my forebodings were abundant within me.
Yeah.
And so it also, that to me creates a sense of more action. In other words, I had some reserve in me from the good things, and that I can be more active in the process with you as a partner, God.
Right. Except maybe I'm doing what you're doing, which is I'm making the psalm mean what I want it to mean instead of what the psalmist originally meant. Just like you saying, it's about tshuva. Right. So maybe. Okay. I want to try to race through to the end. Okay. A very difficult Hebrew line. Hayechovrecha kisei havot yotzer amal alechok. We have different translations. We'll ask Michael for his also. Michael, you have what, Art Scroll?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 2 ones here. Are you allied with seats of wickedness, those who frame injustice by statute? Of course, rhetorical question, the answer being no. Will the immoral claim you as their partner, defending evil under the mantle of the law. Again, those wicked, they think you're in league with them, and they're using the law to cloak their efforts. Art Scroll, what does it say? What does Art Scroll say?
Can the throne of destruction be associated with you, those who fashion evil into a way of life?
Okay. Again, so it's clear that it's rhetorical. It's clear that somehow we're saying, can evil possibly be allied with God? The answer is, of course, no. Okay. Because this psalm is all about, so far, which side are you on? Okay. Or the third side. The third side is the foolish people who say, like, God's not interested. God doesn't see, God doesn't hear. God is not involved in any of this. Okay. Would you possibly ally yourself with the wicked? Or could the wicked possibly ally themselves with you? Yagodu al nefesh tzadik v'dam naki yarshiyu. Those who gang up against the soul, the life of the righteous, and condemn the innocent to death. Okay, good enough. All right. Those wicked people. Again, by the way, we're not talking, I want to point out, we're not talking about here like, they defraud them, they rob the poor. It's pretty harsh what they do to the poor. But Vayhi Adonai li lamiskav Elohai letzur machsi. But God will be my stronghold. My God will be my rock of protection. So do the oppressors have power? Yes, they most certainly do. But God is not allied with them. God is allied with us, the suffering or downtrodden. Now it's personal, right? We're talking about before they oppress the poor, but this is li, right? Same as we started earlier. Miyakum li im mereim. By the way, it occurs to me now that starting with Lulei Hashem Ezrata Li, if God did not help me, and I'll back it up a line. Miyakum li im mereim. Who's going to stand up for me or with me against the evildoers? Up until then, we had nothing in the first person. It was all in the third person. It was all about those poor orphans and widows who are getting the stuffing kicked out of them. There's the evildoer. I'm telling a story. There's the evildoers. There's the helpless. There's the foolish bystanders who think, oh, this is proof that God doesn't care. Okay. It's all telling a story until the point where the psalmist says, I think that's until that point. I think that's the first point where it's miyakum li. All of a sudden it became personal. First half up until that point, it's not personal. The psalmist is just describing the condition of the world, the way it works. The oppressors take advantage of the helpless. The bystanders say, look, what are you going to do, man? Right? And the psalmist is scolding them, saying, what? You think God's not going to do anything about this? You think God doesn't act sooner or later? All of a sudden there's Lee. All of a sudden it's about me. Who's going to stand up for me against the evildoers? All of a sudden the psalmist is actively involved. If God did not help me, I would be dead. When my foot is slipping, you help me. When I have troubles, you comfort me. Oh, could anyone think you would be allied with the wicked? They gather against the tzaddik and the naki, but God is my miskav, my stronghold. So first part, we're talking about what the drama out there. All of a sudden in the middle, the psalmist is interjecting himself. God, you support me. And it's clear now that the psalmist is not an observer anymore in the second half. I hope everyone sees that change. The psalmist saying, God, I need your protection. So God is, we're in the middle of a thought. God is my stronghold. It's going to be my stronghold. Vayashav Elohem Adonam, and God will return their wickedness on them and smash them by virtue of their wickedness. God, by the way, I want you to hear the poetry of the Hebrew about how certain the psalmist is they're going to be smashed. Repeats the word. Vayashev alehem et onam uvra'atam yatzmitem. Yatzmitem Adonai Eloheinu. He and with their wickedness or with their own wickedness or because of their wickedness, he will smash them. Hashem our God, smash them will Hashem our God. Right? It's repeated, the smash them. Smash them, destroy them. It's a very strong word for destroy. Destroy, okay.
Cut them off.
Cut them off. Okay. So this, by the way, L'chuna Ranana is the beginning of the next psalm, Psalm 95. It is not actually part of this psalm. So this psalm actually ends, Vayashev alehem et onam v'ra'atam yatzmitem Adonai Eloheinu. God will return their wickedness on their own head and utterly destroy them. That is the end of the psalm. That's Psalm 94. Why do you think the Siddur, the group mind that composed the Siddur, included the first couple of lines of Psalm 95 in the Psalm for Wednesday, given that it's not actually part of Psalm 94? Let's go to God and sing to God. Let's go sing to him because he is a great God, which is the beginning, of course, of L'chuna Ranana Friday night. Terry, why do you think?
Because otherwise you want to slit your throat. It's so distressing.
I'm going out to my day saying, I'm waiting for God to smash them. Taking off my tefillin and talis. Bye. See you tomorrow. Right. It's although we do want God to smash them, it's a very negative kind of note emotionally to end on. And I think the group mind said we just can't send people out that way. Let's take the next couple of verses. We finished Psalm 94. Let's take the opening of Psalm 95 to make it be on a somewhat more uplifting note. Okay. So, right. It ends then liturgically. God's going to smash them. And therefore, let us praise God and go out to greet God thankfully because God is great. Allahu Akbar, which means God is the greatest. I learned that in my Arabic class. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you ended without adding the words from Psalm 95, it would be like Wednesday. You're already looking forward to Shabbat.
Yes.
How can you end in such a bad note?
Nice. So as I said last week, right? Wednesday, the sequence of Psalms. Wednesday is the furthest away from Shabbat. So one could see Wednesday as the nadir, Nadir, low point of the week. So look at our sequence. Let's consider our sequence again of Psalms. I'm coming out of Shabbat, Psalm for Sunday. Who can go up to God's holy temple, clean hands, pure heart? I feel pretty pure. I just came out of Shabbos. It's nice. Monday, the holy city, the city of righteousness. The kings come to gather against the city. They're just astonished and they go away. They're so impressed. Okay. So we had holy person, day 1, holy city, day 2, day 3. That's starting to, there's this council of the gods or the mighty or the judges or whoever. I thought I could trust them. You thought you could learn. You know what? I realize actually only Hashem is the only one you can rely on. Okay. So we're beginning to get a hint of, you might call it negativity. You might call it realism. Okay. In the Psalm for Tuesday. Psalm for Wednesday is much, much stronger than that. I look around the world and the wicked take advantage of the weak. And some people say, what do you expect? No justice, no God. Doesn't say no. He doesn't say there's no God. That's not what they say. They say God doesn't see, God doesn't hear, God's not going to do anything. Right? They're not atheists, but they do not believe that God is actively involved in the course of justice. Okay? Fools, you think God's not going to do anything? Eventually giving the wicked their comeuppance. All right? God will not abandon God's people because there is going to be tzedek and mishpat, and following God should be all who are straight of heart. By the way, the psalmist might have been despairing up until that point. It's really terrible, right? But there is going to be justice, and who's going to follow them? The straight of heart. And now who does the psalmist want to be? Does he want to be the wicked? No. Does he want to be the helpless? No. Does he want to be the foolish bystanders? No. He wants to be among the straight of heart, the Yisrael Lev, okay, who follow God. So who's going to stand up for me or with me? Okay. Who will defend me against these evildoers, or who will stand up alongside me against these evildoers? God, when I find my foot stumbling, or when I am overcome by my fears, it's you who support me. Okay. Will wicked people think you are allied with them, those who oppress the righteous? God is my stronghold, and God will bring about their downfall. So it does end up on a note of a sense of security. So there is this, I think I see it, this is my interpretation, it's the Psalm for Wednesday, it's the nadir of the week, it's when the nadir, emotionally, psychologically, is that the person's looking at the world and saying, geez, it's a mess. It's really terrible, right? But there is the note of, I don't want to say just optimism. It's really sense of security. It will not always be this way. The wicked will get their comeuppance. I know which team I want to be on, okay? And ultimately, we of course would like, because like Michael O says, we like, tshuva. We wouldn't write this as the wicked will be destroyed. We would say like wickedness will be destroyed. Although that's not actually the language of the psalmist. The psalmist is saying they will be destroyed, those evildoers. There's a thought that keeps me going and supports me and comforts me. They will have their downfall. Okay? But again, because we just can't add with downfall as the last sentence, the group mind of Siddur editing added the next three lines at the beginning of Psalm 95. By the way, just very briefly, what does it have to do with the fourth day of creation? You're not likely to guess what the Talmud says. I warrant. And the Talmud says it's because on the fourth day, God created the sun, the moon, and the stars, and evildoers are idolaters who worship the sun, the moon, and the stars, right? So sun, moon, and stars, idolatry, evildoers, that's why we're talking about them. Kind of certainly a literary stretch, I think, beyond anything that's in the Psalm. But, the Talmud, like us, is stuck with the tradition of the Mishnah saying, this is what the Levites said on Wednesday, so they have to come up with some kind of reason connecting it to days of creation. The Talmud, by the way, doesn't talk about the sequence of Psalms like this. It talks about has to do with the first day of creation, this has to do with the second day of creation, this is the third day of creation. It's only later generations that read it and say, okay, is there some sequence here to the week? Okay, we gotta stop.
Quick question.
Yep, Michael H., quick question.
Yes, the Torah was written in a scroll which was later broken up into parshiot and aliyot and so forth. It wasn't identified that way at first. Is the same true of Psalms? Was Psalms originally one scroll and rabbis later decided where each one started and ended, or?
Well, first of all, we don't know that parshiot are not original. Chapters and verses are not original, but the scrolls have spaces in them to indicate where something starts and ends. And we don't know that those were added later, meaning to assume that whatever the earliest Torah scrolls were, they were all written with no breaks. Like, why would we assume that? The traditional assumption is that the spaces which mark conceptual divisions, not chapters and verses in terms of numbers, but I will say chapters in air quotes, meaning sections. So the traditional view is that those are original to how things were written. Okay. And there was certainly always an oral tradition about where sections started and ended. So there are Psalms scrolls, like in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is the earliest physical writings that we have of something like this. So it would be interesting to look at. Michael is suggesting, maybe those next 3 lines, someone thought they were really part of the Psalm.
Right.
Okay. Well, I guess they didn't think that for Friday night, because Friday night starts, it starts the beginning of a chapter with L'chuna Ranana. So I guess the authors of Friday night thought that's the beginning of a new chapter. Okay. But it's a good question.
Well, when we're talking breaks for the first part of each, for the part when we have the Saturday sections of Parshiot, they're broken up into 7 parts. We obviously don't use the 7, but apparently it was the Christians that broke up those 7 parts, because in Shemot, we just finished and went into Vayera, and Vayera starts in sentence 2, and the end of the Parshiot Shemot is actually sentence 1 of whatever chapter. I think it's chapter 6, but I can't remember.
So, sorry. Jews always had divisions. It's not true that the Christians had Parshiot and we didn't have Jews always had divisions. Okay? If you look at a Torah scroll, there are spaces. The spaces are divisions. Christians then, Barbara, what you're thinking of is that Christians invented chapters and verses.
Right.
In the Middle Ages. Jews ended up adopting the Christian chapters and verses, but where chapters start and stop, according to the Christian division, does not always correspond to the traditional Jewish division.
Okay, well, we got this from Rabbi Klingfeld for this one specific, so maybe not all.
Yeah, I guess the point I'm making is that Christians created the chapters and verses, and those do not always correspond to what the Jews thought of as, I'm going to say chapters in air quotes. I don't think they had the concept of chapters. They had the concept of different sections. Okay. Well, we would call that chapters, but that's kind of a later book invention. Okay. Bookish invention. And their chapters don't always correspond to the traditional Jewish divisions. Okay. Yeah, sections. Christian chapters, which Jews have adopted, don't always conform to traditional Jewish divisions, but divisions presumably were always there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And another course I had or experience that I think the Psalms were written in 3 different periods. At least they divide them, more non-Jewish but academic. I don't know if that's true. 3 different eras with 3 different concepts.
Well, Barbara taught us, I think it was last week or the week before, when the Psalms were written based on Rav Google, right? Right. So the Psalms were written between the year 100, somewhere between the year 1000 and 400.
But if you took a course in a university on the Bible, when they get to Psalms, they'd say there were 3 different divisions.
Some people would say that. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Some would say that. So there are various ways of dividing. And the traditional way, of course, is they were written by King David. Okay. David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. That will be my conclusion. Everyone have a wonderful Hanukkah and midwinter, and we'll meet again, God willing, January 10th.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.